Making your way through an endless stream. Only for a moment, this time is a thing. Let's take a lifetime. You may live here in the day. Thinking I should waste my time, 'cause life just seems so long. Obsessing over answers to the questions that I know we'll all get wrong. So wrong. So wrong.
Oh no. There we go. Hello everyone, welcome to the live stream. Greg Staley of Diverge Media. I'm co-owner here. And on the other side we have Paul Staley. We're gonna do a close-up. We're gonna try it a little bit different this go around. What do you think? Maybe?
Any different than normal?
No. But anyways, thanks everybody for coming to the show. So today got some interesting topics. Don't want to dwell into too much, but basically there's going to be some big articles coming this week. The biggest articles, this is the conversation we've been having, is what performs best. And it seems to be the follow the money in research pieces. So the people have spoken, and that is coming this week. And I'm going to be delving into some of what we'll go over today, and we'll just leave it at that. But how are things? How are you today, Paul?
I'm quite all right, given what's going on.
Yeah, I'm gonna go this way. This is weirding me out. I can't handle it. Where's our background? There we go. I don't like change. That's all it is. All right, so I thought we'd kick it off with Brian Pallister talking about. He got asked a question by a journalist. Basically, they were talking about vaccine hesitancy, I believe, and so they brought up what about drug treatment hesitancy, like ivermectin. So I thought it was an interesting piece, and I want to play that now. Here we go.
Wow. So if we're fighting this disease from the sky, from the land, and from the sea, so to speak, there also seems to be another kind of hesitancy, and I'm speaking about treatment drugs. There's a hesitancy to talk about ivermectin. There's a hesitancy to try it. It seems, maybe you know something more about what our health system is doing, but there's certainly news that ivermectin, Dr. Alessandro Stanton, an oncologist working with a laboratory at Yale, believes that ivermectin could be very effective. He's worked with it. He's tried it. And, of course, he's not the only one. It's apparently a drug that does no harm. In particular, it's not got a big risk to try it, but it has helped many, many people. Are we doing anything with that? And if not, why not?
Notice the drink of the water. And it's like he doesn't like this question.
We're pursuing domestic research that we hope can lead to better vaccine availability in the future, perhaps not during this wave, but when we need boosters in coming years, or if there's another pandemic, to have Canadian research available. And we have production, of course, in Manitoba. It's our leading industry is drug manufacturing. I just want to say thanks to all concerned for the rain, our fire situation.
And he basically goes off on a tangent and talks about the rain, and that's great, and whatever else, but he doesn't really address the question, as you can see. What are your thoughts on that? I don't know. I just rolled my eyes at it.
It's funny because, like, vaccine hesitancy is a thing, but ivermectin hesitancy, hydroxychloroquine hesitancy, any study that isn't a vaccine, people are hesitant towards. Not just people, the people who are running the show. So it is a well-phrased question. I wish you would have asked it a little more confidently and cited a few studies. rather than being like, because she phrased it in a way that was like, I don't really understand this content, you know. But
Yeah, I
it took him like T minus 15 seconds to narrate away from that. So obviously, I don't know if she'll be welcome back into the room after that. Those are the kind
Yeah,
of
it
things
might not
that
be
happen
good.
when you ask the wrong questions at these little pressers. You tend to get overlooked, or they just take your press pass. So
Yeah, you don't get to
it's
ask questions anymore.
you don't want to. Yeah, no, truthfully, you don't.
Yep,
Um,
that's
yeah,
kind of how it unfolds, unfortunately.
hopefully they continue to ask these questions, because it is
Well,
like
I
the
think
missing leg, right? Like it's like early detection with your testing. It's your early diagnostics and treatment, and then your last leg is like your vaccines along with treatment in
you would
hospital,
think.
right? So it's like we're missing that one part of the equation where it's early treatment, which is like your ivermectins and HCQ and things like that. And it's like, okay, so we go from like detection to just like hang out at your house until you need to be hospitalized. That's literally what Ontario is doing.
Mhm.
There's nothing in between.
Yeah, no,
That
vitamin D
is what that
studies.
is.
The Karolinska Institute put together a synthesis of a bunch of vitamin D studies as a prophylactic. Derek Sloan brought it up in the House. It was called conspiracy theory. Ivermectin's another one that could be used as prophylactic or treatment. Same with hydrochloroquine, although it's not as beneficial and it's on the lower end of effectivity. But ivermectin has shown a lot of promise. And for the life of me, I can't understand why we go from straight from like somebody gets sick and now it's vaccine. Like you said, there's other treatments and options. So you're supposed to pull out the vault and say, here's what we have available to us. Here, what works. And then they've done that and they've narrowed it down. We've had the studies now and they're still not allowing those things to be used as a treatment.
I think, imagine they will be in the future once people are on board with getting vaccines. Then it's, okay, you're showing symptoms. Now we're treating it with this as well as vaccines, because there's money to be made there. They won't make
the uncomfortable conversation.
Yeah. Well, they're running a business. Let's not get it twisted here. Big Pharma.
Well, disclaimer for everyone here. This is our personal opinion and we don't want to get banned on YouTube. So we'll just say this is our personal opinion. And I have something here. And this is how we feel about things. Okay. Back to the plot. Sorry, go ahead.
So yeah, I mean, a year from now, you're probably going to see these things start coming out as like you go see your doctor with an illness of COVID. They're going to give you basically a prescription to go pick these things up in hopes that you don't end up hospitalized. Because like we're getting to that point where everybody's getting their vaccines now as well. So why not double down on your sales and say that you could get ivermectin? But the problem is they may have dug themselves a big enough hole that if they allow ivermectin or HCQ on the market for this, they might have to admit defeat that, oh yeah, the studies weren't out, but we knew about it. It's one of those things. It's like, are they too far gone from that narrative that they could ever circle back to it and be like, yeah, no, it's fine. The only way I think they could do that is if they finesse the narrative to say the studies weren't done in Canada yet, but now that they are, you can have it.
Yeah. Oh, it'll be interesting. I get what you're saying. It'll be interesting to see how they pivot out of this. But, like, I mean, to think there's no money involved in this, which is what we're going to do this week. We're going to delve into the money behind things and some of the questions here. But, for instance, we've long pointed out, and again, this is opinion. This doesn't mean anything as of yet. But, like, questions. When you put together a panel, the Ontario Science Table, that's the advisory board for the Ontario government. When you're putting together a panel like that, now they do have an economist in there. They have a few, but was going through the list of members, and 19 out of 27 of the members are tied to the University of Toronto or the Dalla Lana School of Health in some way, shape, or form. 19 of 27. So that seems a little bit heavy on the one-side bias. And then, sorry, I want to add this in before I forget here. So go to the Dalla Lana School of Health. And it's not like they're hiding it. It's like where they received their funding. Here it is. So this is a transparency statement on their site. This is under the Center for Vaccine Preventable Diseases. And they say the Center for Vaccine Preventable Diseases is supported by DLSPH, which receives funding from government, philanthropic, not-for-profit, and private sector organizations. Private sector funding sources include vaccine manufacturers. Now, on the surface, this isn't a bad thing to have somebody like this involved at the conversation. In fact, you probably want the big manufacturers at the table. The issue lies in when the representation becomes 19 of 27 with some ties to the same school. That's where I kind of begin going, okay, that's interesting. And I take note because that seems way too heavy-handed and way too influential for that many members to be on the board from that representation. Again, it could be any influence. You're trying to strike a balance with an advisory panel. So
it wouldn't even matter the viewpoint, even if these are your coworkers, your colleagues. There's a fear when 19 of the 27 work with you that if you go against the grain too often, that there might be repercussions when you return to the workforce. So just, it doesn't matter where it's from or what their ideology is. It's a bad idea in general. But it does make you wonder, what's the ideology behind these guys if you're going to put 19 of them in there?
So, well, you look at the funding and you have to have that conversation. Like you said, is it going to be, would you be ostracized for your position? 19 of 27 are there. Where do they receive their funding from? Now, I'm not going to go into everything I know about this, but everybody, like, please help me share these articles out. When I go in and do this type of research, it's not easy for me. It's very in-depth, and we're always sticking our neck out to do it. Because even when you're telling the truth and just showing truth, there's always that risk involved. So please help. But some of the stuff I'm finding, I'll talk to you when we go off air here. I mean, I just shake my head at. Like, it's time. People, if you want to do the country a favor, if you want to do the province a favor, start pulling on the strings and asking questions of who's in the ear of the people making decisions and where's the money coming from. That's the real questions that need to be asked at the end of this to hold people accountable.
Yeah, it's just a matter of that information getting out. It's been known a little bit for a while that there's definitely a bunch of financial interest on the science table to keep this thing going. So,
well, let's talk about that. So they are making more funding. They're getting more grants as a result of COVID mania. Make no mistake about it. They're getting a ton of funding out of the fear. Like, researching grants is a hard go. Like, that's the first start point to know, because it's really hard to get funding and to sustain yourself and make a good income on it through grants and funding. You're always looking for more funding. You're always like 1 to 2 years out looking for new income.
We'll try and get funding twice. Like, try and get it twice, because the first time you get funding, you got to prove that the funding was warranted. So you got to find something, right? So then to get it twice,
speak against what they.
Yeah. See, that's why, like, science is almost dead, just because everybody cares about a peer-reviewed study. It's like, well, if you're waiting for somebody else to tell you that this is science, you're not looking for science. You're not ever going to break ground that way, because you're always waiting for someone else to be like, oh yeah, no, I think what you think. Well, science has never been think what other people think. It's always been groundbreaking. You need to push through and start asking questions. And yeah, it's a battle for these guys, but they live and die by the funding and the studies, and there's value to it. But I don't think how much we invest into these things should be the amount that we invest in them. It should be, you should explore things and actually pursue science rather than just like, hey, we have an idea. Can you guys throw some money at it and make it happen? Because that's kind of what it just gets to be, companies meddling in it. And now you need to warrant the money spent. And now we better find something. So we better finesse the narrative and make it seem as if. Then you get those under 10% type phrases into the studies, and it's like, yeah, it was 1%, but it sounds good when you say under 10.
Yep, and that's where politics has infiltrated science. There's a documentary on this that's actually very old, very good, from 2008, Ben Stein. It's called Expelled, No Intelligence Allowed, and he went through basically the premise of the film is like he's always been about science and always believed in the method, and he basically goes through and exposes how through funding mechanisms and how political it's become. If you say the wrong things, you don't get funding. If you speak out against certain things, you'll get blackballed and you won't receive funding. And so there's like an unwritten code. Like if you want to go through and receive the funding, you play the game and you say what's expected to be said. So, and that's where it's like, who's funding these studies? Because it matters. If 19 out of 27 of the people are receiving grants from different institutions that are tied into certain things, you should know what they're about. And that's the issue with all this stuff, is there's so many declarations.
It's so obvious, the ideology, right? Like the way we've just been, I mean, let's be honest, we've been fisted and the world's laughing at Ontario right now because they can't believe that we're still going down this road. No one can believe we're still doing this. Even in our own country, we're just the laughing stock of the world right now, because it's like they can't believe how low our case counts are, still locking our citizens down.
Yep.
Like case counts in the States are way higher, and they're packing 60,000 people into arenas. Like, and they'll find some way to justify it, right? Like, it's just embarrassing. It's honestly embarrassing. Like, I'm embarrassed. And I don't blame anybody who's a doctor right now that's like, I want to get out of this place. I don't blame them. It's going to be scary times in that regard, because, like, a lot of good, free thinkers in the medical field are going to be gone. And we're not going to have them.
The medical field.
Yeah, no, it's law. Law is going to be hit hard too. They're frustrated and they're not getting into court and no one's listening. And then you get influence from outside the courts in the courts. And it's like, it's just an absolute disaster. And yeah, we're the laughing stock right now. And I'm not happy about it. That's why we're here.
No, and then it's things like this. Let's pull it up. So we'll go. I have the different members here, and we'll pop back and forth between the declarations I pulled up. So Fistman, let's start it off. We obviously know
our favorite guy.
Yes, the most vocal proponent of the Ontario Science Table. So again, we're not going to comment much, but here's his declaration of interest. So I brought this one up, Paul. I said this was one of his old ones. I said he's pretty full of himself, right? Payments for lectures, including service on speaker bureaus, various ad hoc speaking engagements. He said, I'm an expert on COVID and people want to hear me speak. This was January 26, 2021. That was his disclosure then. I just brought that up just for that, because that kind of gives you perspective into this man's mentality a little bit, I think. And then moving on, this is his most recent declaration. But we see, I'll just pop through this. Pfizer, AstraZeneca, Pfizer vaccines, AstraZeneca vaccines, paid honorariums for both. Ontario Nurses Association, consulting fee. Elementary Teachers Federation of Ontario, he was paid a consulting fee. JP Morgan Chase, consulting fee. Canada Pension Plan, consulting fee. We Foundation, consulting fee. Sanofi Pasteur, honorarium. So needless to say, and he says he has a relationship with EcoJustice Advisor Pro Bono. So I have to go and look through all these organizations, but you see all the consult fees and you see the honorariums paid by the two biggest two of the biggest vaccines that are being put out right now, and he's received honorariums for both.
Yep. Well, everybody involved in this, he's pretty much got a paycheck from, right? Nurses Association is trying to justify masking. Teachers Union is trying to justify closure of schools. The We Foundation, Pfizer, AstraZeneca. It's like, my God, anybody involved tapped him on the shoulder and said, you want to get paid? And he was like, sounds great. Like, he's zero ethics here.
They're making a lot of money. Make no mistake about it. The people on these not all of them. Some of them are good, honest people. I've been looking through the declaration. Some of it's just them doing their job and they're there. But there's a lot of this where you look, it's like they're getting a lot of grants and things right now. This has been a boom for them. And we can't just gloss over that. This is
you see it in our everyday lives that Shoppers Drug Mart has money involved in this. They had one of their heads leave for a government position. I can't remember specifics of it, but then you go to Shoppers Drug Mart, which is indoors. You can have 70 people inside a Shoppers Drug Mart. Then I go to a garden center outdoors, 10 to 20 people max. So it's like, you can see it in every walk of life right now where the money is. If it seems odd and it seems wrong, it's probably because they got money in it. Just like AstraZeneca, whose conveniently expiry dates are changing and we're still using them for second doses. We just slapped a warning label on it. Like, so many countries have pulled AstraZeneca, but we're still pumping it out. Health Canada says it's great.
Yep. Well, and this is we just pulled this up. Sorry, this is Ashley Tweet. I can't say it, but again, this is another member of the Ontario Science Table, paid honorarium from AstraZeneca. So, I mean, why did we do what we did, extending the second dose, extending the expiry date? Well, there's definitely people advocating for AstraZeneca on that board. At least there's the appearance that they would be because they've received honorariums from them.
Yeah,
so
and
again,
like,
you know what I mean? That's what we're looking at.
From my understanding, we knew when the first doses came out, it was probably, if we weren't so damn desperate, we would have pulled it. Like 17 or 18 countries at that point had already pulled it. We had the benefit of being the back of the line and seeing what was going on and making decisions, and we elected to ignore all of it. But from my understanding and the numbers that are out there, second doses of AstraZeneca are far, far, far safer than first. So we're already past the point where it's like, if we're only using it for second doses, we're probably in the clear. By probably, I mean, there's probably going to be some fallout, but they'll try and, I don't know, the numbers will be much, much less significant than what they were on first doses. It's like 1 in a million or something for blood clotting, whereas it's like 1 in 60,000 on the first dose.
It'll be interesting to see what happens. This is the last declaration we have here. Nathan M. Stahl. I think I'm trying to remember why I brought that. This is why. I was like an example of how much some of these people are getting in grants right now through all this. So you received a grant, COVID related, $150,000 operating grant from November 2020 to October 2021. Another grant, COVID Immunity Task Force Hotspot Public Health Agency of Canada, $5 million Canadian operating. Now he's probably hiring other people for that, but again, November 2020 to April 2022. Another grant, $30,000 one-time fund from the University of Toronto Department of Medicine.
Where does U of T get all this money?
Good question.
I would pay money to not have my child attend there at this point.
Yeah. So again, I bring this one up. I'm not saying there's any issues here. I'm just saying there's a lot of we have to have that conversation. There's motivation, certainly from a financial standpoint. This has been a boom for them. And when the mania ends, so too will the funds. And it's not like they're even thinking like that. I'm not accusing them of being sinister people. I'm just saying it's real hard to have a clear mind about things when there's a lot of finances wrapped up in you thinking a certain way. And you can have a bias that's all of a sudden you don't even realize, and you start confirming things out of that bias as a result. And that's what I'm concerned about.
Well, I think when you monetize a bias too, it's slippery slope, right? Like, there's definitely, I would imagine there's 1 or 2 people, if not more, on that board that are like, you know, once this is over, the money dries up. Like, you know, financially, they're like, let's grasp at straws. There's definitely 1 or 2 that's motivating them, for sure. They're not doing this out of the goodness of their heart because they're getting paid. So it's like some of them are going to be trying to push the narrative to keep things closed. We're seeing it because, like, if I was on this board, I would shut my mouth. Like, I would literally just like close all my social media accounts. But like, for whatever reason, there's a few of them that can do anything but shut their mouth. And all they want to do is talk all day online. And it's like, my God, you guys just dig a hole so deep. And it's so obvious, the bias, right? Like,
well,
just they don't see their own extremes. They don't see how my viewpoints of the opposite are apparently just as extreme as theirs for pro-lockdown. It's like, well, the people who are anti-lockdown are in the same lane as you, just opposite ideas. You know what I mean? Like, you're looking, everything that they look at, they're looking for justification for what they're doing, which is locking down. Whereas someone who's extremely anti everything is looking for a narrative that says we shouldn't. And the truth lies somewhere in the middle.
Yep.
That like we should probably help our society in some ways, specifically, in my opinion, surge capacities.
Yeah.
And definitely LTCs. We waited 16 months, guys. We got our
Nothing's been
first
done.
policy for LTCs. And guess what? They all have air conditioner now, guys. We've done it. We've done it.
That's right.
They've all got
Wow.
air conditioners.
I don't mean to pat myself on the back, but we have air conditioning in all of our long-term care facilities now, everyone. I know like a lot of these places are concrete cellars, but we have AC in all of them now.
So it's like there's
Yeah,
definitely some stuff we need to be doing to help society for just like influenza seasons and things like that, where maybe we could be masking in the winter if you are in a vulnerable sector, but you could have done that all along, like if you wanted to.
Mhm.
But it comes down to like educating your population to be like, hey, this might help if you're elderly and you get hit hard. You could do these things. And it's I don't know. I think like the first thing you got to look at is your LTCs. And I know Crystal Pitter was on and she had talked about like doing away with privatization of LTCs. And I can understand why she says that, but I also like respectfully disagree that because it's privatized, you're paying money to be there. Well, if the public sector was improved, they're direct competition for the private sector. So if the public sector, which is
Yes.
funded, it was improved and much better, guess what? The private sector's got to keep up.
Yeah, so what you're
Because-
saying is if the public sector improved, then by definition the private would have to, because
Yeah.
why would I put them in a private home for the same type of money if they're going to
For
receive
worse
better
care.
care in the public home? Yeah, exactly.
Exactly. So I think like I agree with her if the narrative is we're not going to improve our LTCs in the public sector. If we're not, yeah, by all means. Because there is that narrative to pinch pennies and make sure that like we're profitable and justified to the shareholders. But again, the public sector is your direct competition. So if they elevate their game, the private sector would inevitably have to justify the costs of being there. It's like, well, why would I stay here when I can go stay over there for the same treatment, if not better, for cheaper? Right? So like it just needs competition, and so far their competition, if this was a race, their competition has 2 broken legs. Like that's basically what the public sector is. It's awful.
Well, you look at the military report that came out, and yeah, it has been awful. But let's talk the science table shift here in recent weeks. Kind of to just we need to reopen and having a softer approach in general, after basically advocating for exactly what we've had for the last 16 months. So this is their letter to the premier. They just said they acknowledge that school closures create significant harms. Now, thank goodness, they finally acknowledged it.
We've known
Now-
that for 10 months.
They want to reopen schools, manage the risk by region and locality, but this is them going from an extremely hard stance to a softer one. And obviously, this is a departure from where they previously were, which is why you have guys like Fissman, who has been a hard advocate of keeping the schools closed, basically upset and calling out the children's hospital and sick kids as uninformed, I think, at best. Like, yeah, I mean, it's one of those things, like, please, I know your ego's involved with this a lot. It's clear to everyone, just so you know. But you should maybe back up and acknowledge that when you're attacking the sick kids reports, and that's not a good look, man, for anyone.
Just
That's not. You can do anything you want, but that doesn't look good. That's all that I'm telling you. Unsolicited advice.
Just peeling back the curtain and seeing the true characters and the true colors that these guys have. It's like he's so willing to keep his narrative and be right and justify being paid by the teachers union to keep schools closed. Like, let's not sugarcoat it. That's what he's being paid for. That he's willing to basically throw kids under the bus, despite all evidence. And then he said, what doctors? As if like 12 different top organizations aren't run by doctors. Like,
right?
The guy's an absolute kook at this point. Scum, like, honestly, in my opinion, he's scum of the earth. Like, I don't know how you come back from that. Like, where you are literally justifying harming children. We've seen the reports come out with depression rates, kids as young as 8 years old calling suicide hotlines.
Eating disorders way up.
They can't see their friends. They can't see their family. They can't hug anybody. They're told they're vessels of disease. They're basically scared to exist at this point. That's what you've driven them to. And then despite all data that says we didn't need to do this at all, in the face of all that, you're ignoring all that, and you double down and you push the chips all in and say, no, screw you. I don't
on the harm of this. I think you're talking about masking, and I've seen experts try to downplay the harms of that on children. They're like, oh yeah, because kids, I think it was Fistman. He's like, 3-year-olds complain and he retweeted something like they have temper tantrums about a lot of things. It's like, yeah, it's just another one of those things. It's like, okay, the mask thing and what we've done to kids, and that's a visible representation of I need to be fearful, by the way. But nephew in my family got a sniffle, okay? And it was nothing. It was like seasonal allergies. He started freaking out because he thought he had COVID and he thought he was going to die. Literally what he was asking mom and dad. Like, am I going to die? That's what you've done to kids. Congratulations, pats on the back. Yo, we're not doing anything harmful. I just want to reduce transmission. Screw you. Look in the mirror. You're looking at one metric. It's all easy to look good on one metric. And yes, you're an expert in your field, but you're making a call based on one thing and not taking into account a lot of other factors.
There's a lot of experts that are pretty stupid people. Like, just because you got a piece of paper doesn't mean you're intelligent. Honestly, I've worked under people, and you shake your head like, how did you ever get to where you are? And there's some people in that room that are definitely justified as being there. They're very intelligent individuals, and there's a few that don't deserve to be. I don't even know how they graduated. Some of these guys, it's like, yeah, you can read and regurgitate a book, but my God, you cannot think for yourself at all. I don't understand how you work in science and then you're unwilling to accept new information. Like, I don't get that. Like, science is not written in stone.
Because you buy into what you've been told.
It's that peer-reviewed paper type society that they've created, that it's like, well, if I gotta agree with everything because the money doesn't come otherwise. It's just that, like, you go to school and you come out an idiot almost because you're brainwashed into thinking this is the way that society works. And you forget that you went to school for the pursuit of truth and science.
Yes.
And when new information comes to light, you don't research it, you don't pursue it, you don't study it, you just ignore it. Like, that's basically what they've been doing.
Well, yeah, it's regurgitation. Like, school teaches you how to regurgitate the accepted authoritative narrative. Okay? It doesn't teach you how to think things through or think critically. I learned all that crap because I was a poor student. I did a lot of self-education and I read a lot on my own and I love learning, but I hated school because I was told literally, I'll give you a story on this about regurgitation. Academic English, my academic English teacher didn't like my work, accused me of plagiarism because, quote, it was too good to be my work. But basically, if I didn't give the exact answer that she expected, not like if I couldn't coherently put together my train of thought and how I got to it, that didn't matter to her. So in the same year I got a 53 in academic English, I got a 80. I was top of my class with an 84 in applied English because I could think my way through things, but I couldn't regurgitate the way she wanted me to. And if you didn't give a rigid answer, you could be reading Shakespeare. What do you feel about this based on it? And if you took away a different perspective than her, it was the wrong answer. And that's education in a nutshell to me.
Yeah, no, I saw that.
Accepted narrative.
I saw that in college a lot too, that like you get asked questions where it's like, you know, here's a legal situation. What type of liabilities do you see in this scenario? And I could have the same answer as other people in the class and it would be I would get 6 out of 10, whereas they would get 9 out of 10. I'm like, we literally wrote the same thing, but it's a matter of like interpretation, right? Like, so it's either open-ended questions where it's like, please explain and elaborate on your points. It's like, well, you didn't go into enough detail. It's just like they can justify. And again, it's like, if you don't regurgitate it the way they see fit, and it's that line of thinking in education that it's like, here's the idea, it needs to fit into this. Don't ever stray outside the lines. Like, that's kind of the way it is. It's like, this is how you present things, and don't ever do it any differently.
And it's partly like in the internet age, it's why kids, like, I don't think take school as seriously anymore. Because like you see ideas with fluidity because you have access to everything. So if I'm thinking about what's happening in the other side of the world in China, I know it's connected via, because I've done research on all these things, Silk Road Initiative, and that ties into other countries' trade programs, and then that ties into their economics. So that's their political relationships, and that's what education is, exploring these ideas to their furthest consequences, not just taking what you're told about things.
It starts when they're young. I mean, let your kids explore. That's what school is, right? You're supposed to ask questions. It isn't like, hey, read and regurgitate. It's read this, regurgitate, ask questions, elaborate on those questions. You know, there should be offshoots. It's like when you have a 2 or a 3-year-old who wants to play in some dirt, well, go grab a bucket of water and see what they do. You know what I mean? Because now it's opportunities have opened where it's like, oh, I can also do this. Oh, I can also do this. Guess what? When they get into school, when they're 4, 5, 6, and they get into school, they're going to do the same thing just with books. They're going to be like, oh, what else is there? What else is there? What else is there? We've gotten away from that in the classroom where like a lot of people just accept what they're presented as fact and regurgitate it. And that seems to be part for the course. But like I've heard in workspaces for as long as I've been working, I've been told there isn't anyone young who can, problem solve or who can critically think, or it just doesn't exist. It's very few individuals that come through that are in their 20s and 30s that can do those things. And it's a lot because of the education system right now.
The education system teaches a rigid parameter of like, do this, X equals Y, like, you know what I mean? Whereas a lot of the education that's going to be needed going forward is emotional intelligence. And I feel like that lack of ability to think and understand their environment around them is the biggest barrier with kids today. And I don't mean that as a slight against them. It's just, there seems to be a lack of kids. And I've worked with a lot of interns and stuff. They don't seem to be able to connect the way we used to be able to. And maybe that's something to do with the super prevalence of technology being in the hands of kids so young nowadays that they're not interacting the way we used to. Like we grew up, we were always out. We were playing baseball, riding our bikes with our friends. That's all we had. We didn't even have Nintendo and stuff yet. Like that wasn't there yet. So, and we were in the country, we had dial-up internet. Those weren't things we did. We didn't have phones. We went out and we socialized. And even in the last 5 years, that's completely shifted. And now a lot of kids are like 8, 10 years old with phones.
Well, you see it in customer service too. No one can de-escalate an issue that's barely offered. It's just like the online, just respond to an email. Oh, sorry about that. If you just want to call us, like there isn't anybody to talk to anymore that can like actually speak to a disgruntled customer and talk them on. Like those skills don't exist anymore. Like the communication skills. Because it's easier to sit behind a phone or a laptop and send an email or a text message than it is to have a real conversation and kind of read and diagnose an individual and go, you know what I mean? So it's, I know there's a lot of skills lacking in schools and
It's not just schools, it's culture. Like that's the phone thing is a huge deal. Like that's, you watch kids now hang out at malls on their phone. Yeah, it does transfer over.
It transfers over to real world, even if you're trying to learn, because like it's a headline society now. Like,
don't even get me started. You want to rant?
People don't dig deep enough to actually find truths. Like you can look in the States right now and look at the woke culture of like critical race theory and things like that are going on that no one has really bothered to read.
Yep. In their
You know what I mean?
schools, being taught to their kids every day, coming home. And then they're like, man, my kid's got some weird positions on some things that I don't know if I like when they get older. And you're like, yeah, really? You're surprised, are you? You weren't paying attention for the last 8 years while they were in school and what they were being taught, and nobody batted an eye. It's
Like
we always
sex-
have to be hyper vigilant.
Sex changes being taught in school when the courts don't support parental,
Yeah, you
voicing
don't have parental
on it.
rights.
Like, you don't have parental rights when it comes to a sex change, which is like literally by definition chemical castration if they do it pre-puberty, because they'll
Yeah,
never.
And if you make that decision, we're not arguing that you shouldn't be able to make that decision. The issue is when kids who are going through puberty are able to make decisions that they will forever be altered because of. There's no coming back from that. And you're a little so John Hopkins University or John Hopkins Hospital, I can't remember. They stopped doing transition surgeries because they found that although people were happy with the surgery, a large amount of them were still unhappy in their bodies. It was not the issue of how they looked. It was something else.
The narrative you didn't hear was the detransitioners that wanted to switch back.
And you never will, because if you showcase that, you'll get attacked like crazy because you're not caring at that point, right?
And the studies show that these individuals with the medication they take are far more suicidal than the average individual. So there's a lot going on that stuff, and it's just like people don't even know that's getting taught in school, right? Like it's like
no, but the argument on the flip side of it, not to delve too deep into this, is that they're more suicidal because they're not accepted by society. That's the argument from the other side. I've had this conversation with a friend of mine who's a therapist, and he laid out exactly what they teach in schools. He's literally taught to and trained to deal with he knows, and he goes like he thinks it's a good idea because you need to start that process earlier. That's what they're taught. So they don't really check them on this. They don't teach them how to check them on some of these negative feelings. There is no therapy that happens. You go in and you'll listen to these detransitioners and some of these stories. I just listened to one. She's like, I don't know how I went through this entire process of having a sex change and detransitioning in less than a year. She went into a therapist and she's like, this is how I feel. I think I want to change. And they said, yep. Didn't ask about any.
Yeah. I can't even get an ACL repair. You can't even get an ACL repaired within a year. Just think about that.
But and now parents can't advocate for their kids on top of that too. Anyways, this is going to land us in hot water. If you're going to make that decision, all the power to you. It's just when it comes to kids, there's obviously you've got to draw a line in the sand. There's no taking it back. Wait till they're 18, that legal age. I get the argument on the other end. Maybe it's a little bit younger, but
there should always be a wait. Like I think there should be at minimum a wait time added to this.
Yes,
that it's like, okay, we're going to do this. Okay, 1 year from now we'll revisit, and if you're still on board with this, then we're going to. And then schedule
the argument's always, but why should I have to wait when I know now? And I hear all these arguments
because you have to wait for every other medical surgery anyhow. Why do you get ushered to the front of the line? Why do I get to wait 14 to 18 months for an ACL surgery, but you get it right away? You know what I mean? Like, welcome to the medical society. There's a wait list for these surgeries. It would be beneficial, and all the studies are there, and you can read them. But these are the things that get taught, and then people wonder why. Like, man, my kid's pretty opinionated on certain things. And I'm not saying there's bad opinions to have. I just think we should keep opinions out of the classroom, right? Should we not be teaching facts?
That's what you would hope so. That's what they're supposed to be learning is fact. Like that's what I've long said is like, I always got worried when I was working full time at the warehouse. You go like 9 to 5. I dropped my kids off at like 7:30 in the morning. I picked them up at like 5:30. I get home, cook dinner, hang out with them for an hour to a half hour, and then they go to bed. That teacher had way more influence over my child than I ever will. And that's why opinions should be kept out of the classroom, because there's no flipping reason an opinion of a teacher should rub off on my child because they have access to my child, because they're supposed to be there learning factual education that will help them contribute to the economy and society as a whole. Your opinion shouldn't be there rubbing off on them, period. Done.
We're getting like close to a point in our society within like Canada and Ontario where you might see like pop-up schools where like somebody
Not
buys
privatized kind of
a
thing.
building, hires a teacher, and puts 20 kids in the local area taught under that teacher.
Yep.
Because they just don't want to be involved with it. Because it's just,
I'm almost there.
Like, there's a lot of garbage in the classroom that's like, why are they teaching this? But I mean, this conversation should be for another day. There's a lot that we could dig through.
Yeah.
I've read the studies, so.
Well, it's a heavy
Yes.
topic. Nobody's willing to talk about it. And hey, we probably will at some point get banned for this type of thing. So I can't recommend enough. Selfless self-promotion right now. Go to divergemedia.ca, subscribe to our readers list to make sure that you have access to the information we're putting out. We're also starting to upload a lot more on Rumble. Maybe we'll put together a monthly fundraiser fund. If you want to see us start live streaming on Rumble, it's $100 a month. So I'm not doing that out of pocket, but if the fans want that and support that, we need to get off YouTube. We need to get off Facebook. I think the writing's on the wall as far as how you can't have a collegial and open conversation anymore. You can't even reference studies and have an opinion without, like, even if you present both sides of the argument, it's basically there's just certain things that are forbidden at this point on these platforms.
You're just literally told not to say
Thankful to have them, but
and we've
like,
seen it already where like the writing is kind of it's not like we're going to be canceled tomorrow, but like at some point I feel like there's going to be a ban coming. Even just like live streaming doctors at no lockdown or anti-lockdown events talk about things. They're like, well, it's medical misinformation. So we've been flagged for that. We've been flagged for music that was played at a live event. Prior to
pretty much they can get you any way they want.
There's so many.
Any way they want to take you out, they can take you out. And this is what I challenged it. It's not going to matter. And I fully suspect it won't matter. But I just said, listen, I'm a registered business. I'm here showing this unfiltered, just the way it happened from start to finish. I know that's an uncommon thing, but I think all journalists should do that. What do you want me to do? How does this not get banned for medical misinformation? Do you want a disclaimer at the beginning of it? During it? How many times? What do you want me to say? Like, I ask these questions. They're not going to, and this is the issue. It's just certain things you're not allowed to talk about. Project Veritas. Did you see that video? I posted it to the Facebook page. They have a whistleblower come forward talking about the tiered system for VH, the VAX hesitancy scores that are assigned to people in comments. And they are basically shadow banning certain people based on what you share. If you shared a study that said this is maybe problematic with this, that could land you in a tier, and now your comments aren't being seen, and you can't understand why nobody's commenting or liking your stuff. This is already happening.
Yeah, I mean, you see it on posts where like everything seems to be shadow banned on Twitter.
The relevant comments thing, you ever notice that too? Some of the things that
that it automatically transitions me now to relevant comments rather than all comments or newest comments. You know what I mean? Like,
you click newest and then you see a bunch of you're like, well, that's got a lot of likes on it. Why isn't that a relevant comment? And it's, what are they promoting? Why? It's all these questions I have. The writing's on the wall with social media. Things need to change quick, and the alternatives are coming up. But people, you need to make that.
The platform needs to shift. It's much easier to be on Facebook and YouTube where everybody else is, but like the Rumbles of the world, people need to shift platforms so that the reason Rumble charges money to live stream is because they need to expand their servers, so it's still growing.
Yeah. And that's exactly, and I'm more than okay supporting that. If we can get the funds, I'll put up a fundraiser after this, if possible. I know Facebook's a pain in the rear end about that kind of stuff, but I'll try to put up a fundraiser if people want to see it. It's $100 a month. I'm willing to give it a go. I want to build an audience, not here, because again, I feel like at any point, anytime, this could all be taken away like that. And it's not a good feeling when you're trying to build a business.
I mean, you might have to just go back to the basics and film ourselves doing this and then upload the video.
To the website and hope people share it. And well, that is coming, and I do think that's something I'm going to incorporate soon is videos on the website for certain ones. Not too much because then you need more server space, but it gets convoluted. I want to show you this, Paul. This is one of your favorite lawyers. We were talking about the forever shifting narrative and kind of how politicians are suddenly the tune's changing. Science table changes their tune a little bit, and politicians do as well. So Ryan O'Connor has been a superstar. He's a lawyer, partner at a GTA law firm, but he's basically been going after a lot of these hypocritical issues.
Deserves props for what he's been doing, because he's been legally reopening gyms.
Yes.
For the sake of your health, because our government shouldn't have shut them down, because they are what keep us healthy. So shutting them down in the name of health is ridiculous. So he's been fighting to keep them open. I think he's got to be over 30 gyms that he's reopened legally.
Yeah. And it's
specifically for
like
people with disabilities. Yeah. So he's honestly, in terms of morals and ethics, much, much greater than a lot of the guys we've had to deal with for the last year. And he deserves his props. He's been doing good work. So yeah, he's been heavily critical of John Tory lately. And as our Canadians love hockey, we had to watch Montreal pack a bunch of fans into a stadium the other day. And now he's talking about Leafs Game 7. I'm sure there's a tap on the shoulder to be like, hey, you know how much money we're going to lose? Yeah.
Okay, so he said, this is I got to read it. Ryan O'Connor, Twitter. In light of improved numbers, I would probably take a serious look at doing something inside. Indoor thing is perhaps a more viable prospect as opposed to the outdoor part. This is Mayor John Tory. Same mayor who introduced vicious lockdowns on indoor dining, gyms, salons, now believes that while these are all closed for 7 months because of indoor risk, it's now entirely fine to have thousands of fans inside, but falsely claiming that outdoor gatherings pose more risk. With the mayor's Damascene conversion on the safety of indoor gatherings, he must immediately support ending the ban on amateur kids sports, spectators and amateur kids sports, indoor dining, gyms, patios, outdoor gatherings. He just rips them apart. This last one I want to read here. It's sad that the mayor only began to care about reopenings when, just like 2020, cases tapered off in May. It's easy to follow the inevitable, but a leader with courage would never have stood idly by imposing and supporting the longest, harshest lockdowns of any major city on earth. He did for no other reason than pandemic theater. He knows that gyms, restaurants, and sports don't cause viral spread because Maple Leafs legally work out, dine indoors, and play. There are also many gyms in Toronto currently open, legally serving the community. So, Ryan O'Connor,
it is.
Thank you for what you're doing.
You cannot have a beer on a patio, but the Leafs can have fans in the stands. Go F yourself.
John Tory logic.
I know it's like a follow the money society, but come the F on, man. Like, are you joking?
Yeah, they're not even trying to hide it a little
bit. They're not even
trying
to hide the bias anymore. They're not even trying to hide the bias. He's a known Leafs fan too, and there's a lot of money through the Leafs in Toronto. But, if you're going to let fans in the building, let fans on patios watch the game. Why not? It's safer. Follow the science, right, John?
It only makes sense, Mr. Tory.
Absolute idiot. He will not be reelected.
He's not an idiot. An idiot implies he doesn't know, right? The man's not an idiot. That's worse. It's worse when you know exactly what you're doing and you do it.
John might actually be an idiot. I'm not convinced that he knows what he's doing. I'm being honest. I don't think I think he's pretty aloof and just is kind of just.
What, to say that outdoor transmission is more dangerous?
Yeah,
I mean, come on.
He's an idiit.
It's a reach. It's
not even a reach. It's just a blatant lie. Did that get flagged for medical misinformation or what? Because some of our videos have, and they cited studies.
No, I've gone directly to the source and still get flagged. Yep. No, welcome to my life.
How are they more critical of us than John Tory? Come on.
Okay, so I'm moving on here. So the recent report from a federal government, where do we go? Federal advisory panel recommended an end to government-authorized hotel quarantine for travelers. They said the current requirement for all air travelers to quarantine in government-authorized accommodations should be discontinued, but they should provide a suitable quarantine plan for approval and then adhere to this plan. So if the traveler does not have a suitable plan, they should be required to adhere to an alternative one. I got an idea. If you're healthy, no quarantine. Done.
Yeah, that would be
Open
the
up.
easy route, right? Like,
Yeah.
this is the writing's on the wall because the court case is early June. I think it might even be June 2nd.
Which
For
one are you
quarantine
referring to?
hotels? For the
Oh,
try to
yeah.
challenge on quarantine
I can't
hotels.
keep up anymore.
The
I can't
U.S.
keep
is
up.
also opening up the land borders shortly. They basically
Mhm.
forced our hand. So, like, then the government recommendation, or their recommendation to abolish them, essentially, with a, we talked about this a long time ago, with a reasonable accommodation. Can I not just go to my house and sit in my bedroom away from my family for 2 weeks?
No, you cannot.
Right? That's
And that's
you
what they
can't.
argue
No, I
for.
gotta go
It's
to
like,
a hotel.
can I just
So-
provide a responsible quarantine plan? And they were like, no, you got to go to the government facility. I always imagine
what
Macho Man and
the-
Randy Savage telling these brother.
So the alternative is just people aren't flying into Canada anymore. They're flying into Buffalo, and they're just driving over the border. You get like a rapid test, and they send you with a at-home test for day 8 or whatever that you have to submit. And that's
No, and
you
then
don't
they-
have to stay in the hotel, and you don't take a fine either. So it's much easier, less headaches, less legal battle, less arguments to just take the loophole that they gave you and abuse it. And that's what people have been doing. And I don't think Trudeau gives a crap because he's been allowing
Yeah.
it for forever, even though he's been heavily criticized by Doug Ford for the open borders, to the point where they stupidly made it so you couldn't fly in from India. Then people just fly to a different country and expose themselves to the virus even more and then fly in from there. They're still going to do it if you allow them the loopholes. And it was like, it took me a matter of like 3 seconds to find that loophole. So like, you're just costing people more money and annoying them and pissing them off, which means you're not getting reelected. So
You're telling people you had to like spend $2,000 to quarantine at a hotel facility for 3 days. I can quarantine at a hotel for $129.99 a night. What? How did we, like that part always blew me away too. It's like $650,
I would just
$700
tell
a
them
night almost.
I would just tell them I have no money.
I'm broke.
Like, well,
son.
what if I can't pay? Do I just go home? I can't pay
Yeah.
$2,000. Where do I go? Where do the broke people go? Because I ain't got
You
$2,000
had
for you. Where is there a special place for me? Do I just
You
hang
had
out in
enough
the
to
field?
travel. So the assumption is that you have enough to quarantine, right? Like, and then what? You could be held criminally liable, I guess, if you didn't have the money. Like, 'cause-
I imagine they would charge you for it regardless, and if you didn't pay it, it would go through collections and just like hamper your credit rating. And
well, now
I
they're talking
imagine
about tying these
maybe
fines.
they would tack some sort of threat on in terms of a fine for lack of payment. But I mean, you could just go over, just fly into Buffalo and rent a car and drive in. That's it. Done. It's way easier to do that. Like that would be my plan if I had to travel. Might have to go to California. I don't know.
Yeah.
So I am very interested in this for the sake of, our health and my personal interests in the near future.
Obviously there's some travel on the horizon potentially. I don't think I'll personally be going under the current restrictions. If you can refuse testing, it might be one thing. If you could just go in quarantine. But
no,
if it's still mandatory,
if it's still like this, I'm just flying into Buffalo and driving over. Like that's just going to be the way it is. Like that's not going to twist it. If you're going to allow that loophole, I'm going to take advantage of it. So there's nothing illegal with that. So screw it.
as has everyone else that's taken advantage of that loophole. So we've got a couple more topics here, but I wanted to hit this article. It was an older one, not that old. It was this week, but I'm a madman, and I put together this article for all of you. All-cause mortality Canada 2020, number of deaths is up. And I say I'm a madman because 4 different
It
age
took
groups had to
forever.
be calculated. 52 weeks and 208 different data entries. I was actually plugging data in for about 3 hours. Just like write it. Anyways, 2020, all-cause mortality is 303,350, 0.8% of the total population of 38,048,738, up from 0.75% of the population in 2019. But I say excess death is up. What does this mean? It doesn't mean that lockdowns worked. I brought that up. Lancet study in August of 2020 reporting that, quote, reduced income dispersion, reduced mortality, and the number of critical cases. But rapid border closures, full lockdowns, and widespread testing were not associated with COVID-19 mortality per million people. And then I talk about the COVID cost benefit analysis of the Simon Fraser economics professor Douglas W. Allen, talking about the harm of lockdowns being much greater than any benefit they may have provided. And then, of course, this one, provisional death counts and excess mortality January to December 2020. They said this: in the early months of the pandemic, the weekly number of excess deaths and deaths caused by COVID-19 were closely aligned in mostly affected older populations, suggesting that COVID-19 itself was driving excess mortality in Canada. However, more recently, the number of excess deaths has been higher than the number of deaths due to COVID-19. And these deaths are affecting younger populations, suggesting that other factors, including possible indirect impacts of the pandemic, are now at play. And so I take that to mean when they say possible indirect impacts of the pandemic, you mean like lockdowns and business closures and mandatory masking and all the different things that maybe have led people to be in a toxic mental state. And we're seeing a lot of young people committing suicides, overdoses, opioid overdoses way up. That's the big concern for them, because my understanding of suicides haven't actually been up all that much. A lot of the tendencies around it are up, and markers around it are up, but the actual numbers aren't. And so, yeah, what are your thoughts, Paul?
I mean, we've known that. I just wonder, like, Roman Baber, does he have a legal case against Conservatives for kicking him out? And then this information comes out that confirms what
Everything
they
he
justify. Knew. So he said that lockdowns were causing more harm than they were doing good. Early on, they kicked him out of the Conservative Party for going against the party narrative. So he is now sitting as an independent. And now information comes out that he was right. So how do you justify kicking me out for saying truth? So that's where my head went when I saw this, was like, he was right all along, and we had a very good feeling that he was right, and we saw the things going on, and it smelled like smoke, so there was probably fire. And then the studies start coming out that support that, and you kind of just roll your eyes like, yeah, we know. This just confirms it, right?
Well, there's been lots of experts to speak out, and I wanted to pivot to this. So I covered it in the past, but there was a panel that spoke, and these are the type of people that are being ignored altogether. But do I have this up? No, I don't. Sorry, everyone. So these were this is the panel I was referring to. Doctors sound alarm on harm of lockdowns. Concerned Ontario Doctors COVID-19 Summit. You can find it on divergemedia.ca. So this was hosted on April 11, 2021. And Care Not Cuts, Concerned Ontario Doctors, put this panel together. So Dr. Richard Chavez is the former Chief Medical Officer of Health for the province of Ontario, and he's a retired physician. He was the moderator for this event. We also had Dr. Jay Bhattacharya, who's an epidemiologist of infectious disease at Stanford and a professor of medicine at Stanford University. Dr. Sunetra Gupta, epidemiology at University of Oxford, professor of theoretical epidemiology at the University of Oxford, and Dr. Martin Kulldorff. He works at Harvard University as a professor of medicine, and he's an infectious disease epidemiologist. So these are high-level people that are not involved in the discussion right now. And I want to point out what Dr. Richard Chavez said when he introduced the speakers, because it speaks to where we're at with all of this. So he starts off and he says, where are we at? I'm delighted to be here today, and as I mentioned before, you faced efforts of censorship by our medical licensing body in Ontario. And it's wonderful to see that you're not being intimidated by that. So that alone, we know that. But he said one of the great casualties of COVID has been the loss of collegial, constructive discussion, like polite discussion, and that's why I think this panel is so important. And then he went on to say, I think that I have found the last year to be very from an intellectual and professional standpoint, a very isolating experience. I've had a handful of supportive colleagues, but I have felt very much cut off from the mainstream of discussion in the professional and scientific world and from the media, where I've been effectively canceled. So this is a guy that was the former chief medical officer of Ontario. Very, 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 very qualified to speak on this matter. And he's like, I've been cut off from the media speaking on this. I felt isolated. And so, again, do you think you're having a straight, honest, and open, transparent conversation on these things and finding the best answers when a lot of these people aren't being represented at all at the table?
Yeah, I mean, people would be like, "Oh, do you think you're smarter than, a doctor or scientist?" Like, no, but there's many of doctors and scientists who adamantly disagree with the science table here in Ontario and almost all of the governing bodies in Canada. So I guess your doctors are better than these doctors. Like, you know what I mean? Like, my doctor could beat up your doctor. Like, that's basically what we're talking about here. Like, it's like,
well, for me,
they're not wrong. They literally got told in an open letter that if you went against the ideologies of public health, you could be disciplined. That's what they're told openly from the governing body. So, yeah.
Yep, you can't speak out on it because then you're going to be...
They basically just said to you, we have a biased opinion and we're telling everybody else who doesn't agree with us to shut up and deal with it. That's what this was in a nutshell.
I'll give you a comment that somebody said to me on this because this is how people literally think. Okay, so I brought up like Dr. Richard Chavez, Dr. Jay Bhattacharya. These are like world-renowned experts. You come from Stanford and Harvard as epidemiologist, you're intelligent. Okay, you don't just get into those places. It doesn't work like that. But I had somebody tell me that, you can always find a few quacks that are willing to say that. Like, okay, no, but it's not a few quacks. It's hundreds and hundreds of doctors that have signed letters asking for open debate. It's the former chief medical officer of Ontario. The guy used to run the province, and all of a sudden he's not qualified to speak on the matter, and we don't care? No, it's because politics has infiltrated medicine. And now we don't get a real discussion in medicine. We get a political discussion in medicine.
Yep. No, I 100% agree. You're only hearing one narrative, and it's very obvious if you've been paying attention. I think even the average person is aware that they're not getting a second opinion here. You're getting, like you said, a bunch of people from U of T.
19 of 27 members. Yeah, look for that article. That's going to be a doozy. I'm worried. The only reason I don't want to share the one piece I have is because I'm worried somebody else will run off and write an article with it. But I think I'm being hypersensitive. I just showed you.
I mean, there's some good stuff coming this week, so have an eye out. That's really all.
Yeah.
In terms of this information on the science table, there's some good stuff coming this week. It's just Greg is in the middle of the investigation part of journalism that he's unable to speak on it too much because it's not 100% ready, but it's coming. You'll see.
Pretty much. You got to dot all your T's, cross your I's, and when it's sensitive stuff, you really got to be careful about how you do it.
Dot your T's and cross your I's.
I see what you did there. All right. No, yeah. So I really do expect some of that. Like some of the stuff I found when I started digging, and I'm sorry I haven't done this sooner. I've been so busy just trying to keep up with the news cycle that I'm like, I need to go back to the honeypot of what people want.
I mean, you have like a 4-day-old child right now. So, I mean, you're forgiven.
Yeah. No excuses. No excuses. Speaking of which, all right, time for a shameless self-plug, and then we'll end out on one more topic here. But hey, everybody, you see that T-shirt in the that one. You see that T-shirt in the background? We have those available at divergemedia.ca, $35, as well as the hat Paul's wearing. Diverge Media hats, $35 plus shipping and handling. If you can support us that way or support us through donation, really appreciate it. And back to it. So yeah, no, it's I guess I'm forgiven, but I don't forgive myself. I got a business here to build. Got places to go, people to see, things to do, man. Yeah, but yeah. So my daughter, well, and now I got a newborn, so the wife's up like 4 or 5 times a night, which gets me up, and then we're splitting, getting up throughout the night. So it's fun stuff. It's all good. We'll figure it out.
Daytime comes, and the other kids are up, and then you're tired, and then you're trying to figure out can I sneak off for a nap?
Never happens.
The answer
It's just
is no.
earlier bedtime. The answer is always no. All right, everyone. Thank you for tuning in to Divergent Media Sunday show, where we shoot politics straight. We will be here again next Sunday at 3 p.m. Eastern. Make sure to check out the merch store. And as always, thank you for joining us. Thanks, Paul.
Thank you for having me.
Well, yeah. I mean, it is the Sunday show with Paul Staley.
I guess it is.
All right. Cheers, everyone.